If you've been trying to free yourself from addiction, or you work with people on this issue, I'd like to share with you a model, the cause of addiction that I've been working on for the last few years. I'm calling this the Reenactment Model of Addiction. And let me just start by saying I'm not saying this is the end all be all cause of all addiction. Definitely not. There could be a lot of things going on with addictive behavior. This is just one of many models that can be enormously helpful. But when this is the main thing going on, I think you might find this model to be extremely helpful, not just in understanding the addiction, but in actually resolving the underlying causes and shutting it down. And I'm basing this model on work I've been doing. I'm not an addiction specialist, but I've been lucky enough to work with a number of clients on different kinds of addiction and have had great success with this. So I'm calling it the reenactment model because it's based on the idea of subconscious reenactment of trauma. And I could actually speak for hours on this. Sometimes I do. I'm going to try and break it down to just a few minutes for you. So this is a crash course in reenactment. If you'd like to know more, check out my book, Hacking Reality, or Peter Levine's Waking the Tiger, extremely helpful, or Dr. Robert Scare's 8 Keys to Brain Body Balance. Very useful information. So, our bodies are mammalian animal bodies, right? So, when we're faced with a threat, whether it's existential threat, like we might be killed, or even a threat to our identity, our bodies will go into fight or flight, which releases an enormous amount of energy into our muscles, adrenalated blood. So sometimes we are disempowered to run away or to fight back, or we experience ourselves, imagine ourselves to be disempowered. And when that happens, our brain will switch from fight or flight over into the freeze response. And if you think about young children, they just don't have a lot of fight or flight resources, right? So they're apt to go into the freeze response very, very easily. So, why is this relevant? Well, when we do go into the freeze response, the thing that freezes is actually time. The incident that we're experiencing is frozen in a sense in time. Essentially, a part of us splits off and is encapsulated. This is the work of Dr. Scare, encapsulated with dissociation so that we can go on living and not just lay down and die. The main thing that's encapsulated is the raw emotional intensity of that experience. And if it's the freeze response, it's nothing good. You know, it's some kind of fear, terror. It could be anxiety. It could be shame or guilt or intense grief. Whatever it is, it's sealed up for us and we're free to keep living, right? That's the freeze response. So it works pretty well, except for one thing our subconscious mind hates these, what Dr. Scare called trauma capsules. It takes energy to keep them sealed up. And I think most of us accumulate quite a few of these, even just in childhood. So, just like a cyst, a physical cyst in your body where some kind of toxic material is encapsulated by tissue and to isolate it from the rest of the body, these trauma capsules are like a psychic cyst. And your body will do everything it can to push the cyst out of your body. Well, the subconscious wants to do that with these trauma capsules. Unfortunately, it only has one way of doing that. The subconscious is very powerful, I'm sure you know, but it's also dumb as a box of rocks. There's really no creative intelligence there whatsoever. The only thing it can do is replay, redo, rehash, repeat, and reenact what's happened before. So that's its trick to try and heal us from the raw emotional intensity of these traumas. Its big trick is to put us through the experience again and again and again and again. And maybe you've noticed in your life you have repeating bad trips that keep coming up, periodically. Oh my gosh, why is this happening? I think most people are very familiar with this, maybe without understanding it's a subconscious trying to heal you. Well, in working with addiction, I've come to realize that almost always there's a strong negative emotional charge after using. And by using it, it could be drugs or alcohol. It could also be shopping for shoes or a porn addiction or anything like that. Binge eating. Um, every time somebody uses, they end up feeling really bad. And I started thinking, well, what if that's not a coincidence? What if that's actually the point of the addiction? Okay, so here's where it gets really counterintuitive. Say that somebody's using brings them an intense feeling of shame. Well, why the hell would anyone want to feel that, right? Well, they don't. Nobody wants to feel that. But the subconscious does in its effort to heal them. So, if you look at addiction as possibly being a vehicle to deliver really intense negative emotions um, as part of a reenactment, well, then it begs the question, if this is actually happening, where did that ball get rolling? What was the first trauma that caused this in the first place? And interestingly, it may have nothing to do with the actual addiction itself. For instance, somebody who's binge eating, the feeling they get after each time may have come from an original trauma that had nothing to do with food whatsoever. It's just as an adult, the binge eating is just the perfect way of eliciting that horrible feeling over and over and over. See, this is the dumbest strategy of all time, I believe. I don't know if it ever works. I think maybe it never does. It actually makes things worse for us. But, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This is the good intention of your subconscious mind. So, if the addictive behavior is driven by this reenactment machine, if you will, the solution is finding that original trauma and resolving it. And that will shut the whole thing down. Now, what do I mean by resolving it? Essentially, taking the emotional charge away. And it's great to understand that this might be happening, but understanding isn't going to do the trick. For me, the simplest, most elegant way to resolve the negative emotional charge in the original trauma is EFT tapping. And if you haven't learned that, take 15 minutes and learn how to tap. I guarantee it'll change your life. So once we're aware of the original trauma, we can just ascertain, like on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is the most intense, how strong is your feeling about that memory now? Not at the time it happened, but right now. Say it's an 8 or a 9. Great. Well, we just tap on whatever that feeling is, whatever was going on in that circumstance, and just keep tapping until we get the intensity levels close to 0 as humanly possible. Now, you can do a version of this just on the feelings elicited by using. It's not as elegant, it's not as effective, but say that you're binge eating and it leaves you feeling this guilty feeling, but with a mix of um, rebelliousness, like you're not the boss of me kind of feeling. If you just allow yourself to tune into that feeling and tap the intensity down, that in and of itself may be enough to turn the whole thing off. So, a more powerful way of resolving it is to use hacking reality technique or matrix reimprinting and go back into the original scene and do EFT tapping with the younger self who actually went into the freeze response at that time. Um, that's less of a self-help way of going about it. You pretty much need a practitioner to go that route. If you can find a great practitioner, it may be the most powerful thing you can do there. So you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute. How the hell do I know where this began? The first time I felt this way. Well, I mean, for some people, it's obvious. It's crystal clear where that first feeling came from, what traumatic event that's from. Sometimes, though, it's very, very early in childhood, and we're protected from that awareness by dissociation. So I've got a very simple trick for you. I call it the magic trick. It's just tapping on your collarbone point up at the top of your sternum, tuning into the terrible feeling that you get after using, closing your eyes and asking out loud, show me an image of my younger self who first felt this shame or whatever the feeling is. And then just take a mental step back, and often a picture will come up. You're asking for an image of the younger self. You don't need the whole kit and caboodle. Um, that's usually enough to get started, right? I've found with clients and when I'm the client, this trick works about 85 to 90% of the time. Sometimes though, somebody might get a whole series of traumatic memories pop up. Then just ask again, but with a slightly refined question. Show me the younger self who most needs help with this feeling. And that will usually winnow it down to one. So again, once you have the memory, you're tapping down your current emotional charge on that negative feeling. Once the charge is down to zero, or as close as you can possibly get to zero, that's pretty much going to resolve that memory and shut down the reenactment machine. I've seen this happen with a number of clients. So I would like to give you a quick story. One of the sessions I did that helped crystallize this whole concept for me, a fellow came to me with wanting help with a sex addiction. And he had been caught by his wife cheating a number of times. She was divorcing him. He was heartbroken, and he really wanted help. He'd gone through all kinds of programs and different courses trying to beat this, but it just really had him. He just kept doing it. Well, as he went into his story, I found some things really odd. One was, he would arrange these liaisons, but whenever he actually met with the woman, he couldn't get it up. He actually never had sex with any of the women he arranged meetings with. I thought, wow, if you're a sex addict, you're really bad at it. Um, the other thing that I found extremely odd was, I asked him, hey, when your wife finally caught you, maybe she looked through his phone or something. What was the feeling you had? Was it just a tremendous amount of shame or what? And he's, oh no, no, it wasn't shame at all. It was relief. I thought that's weird. The whole time up until getting caught, I was just in an agony of anxiety. It was all-consuming thought. When am I going to get caught? What if I happen to get caught? And then when I finally get caught, it was just relief. I thought that was pretty weird. So as we tapped together, it became really clear he didn't have a sex addiction. He had a getting caught addiction, right? So we actually used the magic trick, got back to an original scene, and just very briefly, his dad had remarried a really scary narcissist, or maybe even a sociopath, who he was an only child. She beat the hell out of him, but in a way that didn't leave bruises. And this went on for some years until when he started going through puberty, she got even worse because she got sexually creepy with him. The first memory we got to, he was taking a shower and she ripped the shower curtain back and accused him of masturbating while thinking of her, which was, I'm sure, the farthest thing from his mind, and then proceeded to beat him terribly. So this kept happening over and over again, these false accusations, followed by beatings. I was like, wow, that sounds a lot like the circumstances he was describing to me. He would get caught and basically falsely accused of having sex with women because he wasn't having sex with them. I mean, it doesn't make his behavior okay. He really was, I guess, trying to cheat on his wife. He just never accomplished that. But really, it was a very precise reenactment of this weird, convoluted trauma, being falsely accused of something sexual that he didn't actually do. So we were able to tap with his younger self in that first trauma and pretty much shut the whole thing down. So I'm going to suggest if you're trying to free yourself from addictive behavior, think about whether every time you use, you end up with this some sort of predictable, consistent, strong negative emotional charge. And then use the magic trick. See if there's an original trauma there. Again, you can just tap on the charge without doing the detective work, and that might very well do the trick. But if you can find the original trauma and tap it away, that's going to be even more powerful. Best of all, do hacking reality and work with the younger self directly, tapping on them. So, again, I'm not saying this is the underlying cause of all addiction by any means. There are other models that I always check out with clients, connection, secondary gain, and guiding star are three of the ones I use. And maybe I can make videos on those later. This is a newer one. I've actually never heard anyone else uh, describe before, so I thought I better share it. And if you find this video helpful, please press the like button, maybe subscribe. And definitely, if you know someone struggling with addiction, consider sharing this video with them. It might possibly help them. So, my name is Rob Nelson, tappingthematrix.com or tappingthematrixacademy.com if you want to learn to be an EFT practitioner. And thanks so much for watching. I hope this helps.